Well, we're already at the second Mercury retrograde of 2020, and if you guys weren't here for the first one, it was a bit of a doozy, so let's actually pay a little bit closer attention to this one, shall we? How's it going, everybody? My name is Cam White, and in this video we're going to be talking all about the Mercury retrograde in Cancer happening from June 17th until July 12th of 2020. And in this video we're going to be covering what a Mercury retrograde is, what this Mercury retrograde is going to entail, when it's going to begin, when it's going to peak, when it will end, and as well, if you guys stick to the end of the video, I am going to be covering how this Mercury retrograde is going to be affecting every single zodiac sign, so you guys can have a little bit of insight as to what to expect for yourselves for the next few weeks. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably already know what a Mercury retrograde is. However, let me go ahead and explain it just in case you've never heard of it before. Now, a Mercury retrograde is when the planet Mercury appears to be moving backwards in the sky. It's actually not moving backwards, it just looks like it, because I think if it was moving backwards, I think we'd all be freaking out a little bit more because that'd be a little bit crazy. However, a Mercury retrograde phase is when Mercury's orbit around the sun starts to go in between the sun and the earth, so we don't really see it, and that makes it look like it's moving backwards in the night sky. Now, in this video, we're not going to be talking too much about the astronomy of a Mercury retrograde. However, in astrology, we do pay attention to these Mercury retrogrades quite often. Mercury goes retrograde about 3 times a year, and about every year, it's going to go retrograde in the same element of sign, and this year, it's in water signs, which leads us to this Mercury retrograde that we're experiencing. So this specific Mercury retrograde is going to be happening from June 17th till July 12th. Every Mercury retrograde lasts for about 3 weeks, and those 3 weeks can feel like an eternity. So what does a Mercury retrograde mean? Mercury is going to be the planet of our thoughts, our communication, how we literally send and receive messages. So what usually ends up happening during Mercury retrogrades are some type of miscommunication with someone. As well, during Mercury retrogrades, we usually see problems with technology coming up, people's cell phones or laptops breaking or things having to be replaced that involve communication. So if you haven't already, make sure you backed up your computers and that you have some insurance on your phone or your laptop, because that might be an issue coming up. Most importantly though, Mercury retrogrades are a time to rethink, review, and reflect. Mercury is known as the trickster in astrology, so there can be some annoying things that come up during this time, and it can make it feel like it's the end of the world. However, in astrology, Mercury retrogrades are more of annoying than they are a huge deal. They happen so often that you kind of just have to go through them. Now, let's go ahead and go over the specifics of this Mercury retrograde. Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde on Wednesday, Mercury's Day, June 17th at 9:58 p.m. at 14 degrees Cancer. Now, the sign of Cancer really gets put into this box of, oh, it's all about our emotions, all about our feelings, just like all the water signs are, which is very true. However, the one thing I really want to focus on with the sign of Cancer is going to be of necessity. Cancer is going to be focusing on what is needed. What do we need to protect? What do we need to defend? What do we need to nurture? Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon's going to be ruling our body, our emotions, how things move quickly. And while Mercury is retrograding in this sign, I really think this is going to be a time to rethink, reflect, and review what is needed in our lives and what is of necessity. Now, last year, Mercury retrograded in Leo and went back into Cancer. And if you watch my video from last year, I really talked about how Mercury retrograding back in Cancer is saying what needs to be said. However, this Mercury retrograde is going to be more focused on our needs. Again, what do we need? What is of necessity? And how can we rethink our needs? How can we review what is of necessity? How can we reevaluate what exactly we need to say or what is going on inside of our heads? Now, as Mercury has been in Cancer and moving closer towards the degree it's going to station retrograde, you've probably been thinking about all of this stuff of, hey, what is of necessity? What do I need? What do I need to say? However, as Mercury actually stations retrograde, this is when you're going to start seeing the reflecting, the reviewing, the rethinking. And on June 17th, as this all begins, it's going to be important to look at your chart and see what house or where the sign Cancer is in your chart, because that's going to tell you where in your life you're going to be experiencing this Mercury retrograde. For example, if you're a Leo rising and you have Cancer in the 12th house, this is going to be a time of rethinking, reviewing, and reflecting hidden and suppressed parts of yourself that you don't acknowledge, and seeing things that you don't always see before. And for those Leo risings out there with Mercury retrograding in Cancer, this is going to be a time of being maybe a little bit more isolated or alienated, so you can kind of work on your mental energy. So on June 17th, as Mercury does station retrograde, this is when the reflecting and the reviewing really comes up. This is when the changes really begin, when the problems really start. you'll see things kind of begin with Mercury entering shadow. You'll see the themes kind of at least be laid out on the table. It's kind of like if you're playing a game, it's kind of like reading the rules and the directions like before you get started. But when Mercury stations retrograde, this is when the game actually begins. However, we get to the middle point of the Mercury retrograde on June 30th. And this middle point is when Mercury is going to conjoin the sun at 9 degrees Cancer. In astrology, we call this cazimi, and this is when Mercury is in essence being purified by the light of the sun, when things start to become clear. During Mercury retrogrades, it's known for things to be a little bit more confusing, to be a little bit more lost, to be a little bit more drained. And so when we have Mercury conjoining the sun, this is when those ideas, this is when those insights really come into play, and you can actually start to realize things. And this is also when information comes in and ideas really come in. And now, when Mercury stationed retrograde on June 17th, there wasn't any aspects to Mercury, so it really wasn't doing anything. Mercury kind of had its own space to really reflect and review in Cancer. However, once we get to that middle point of the Mercury retrograde when it conjoins the sun, this conjunction is going to involve Uranus. Uranus is going to be sextiling the Mercury-Sun conjunction exactly. And Uranus is the planet of extreme ups and downs, volatility, liberation and freedom and excitement, but also heavy lows, falling down. And as Uranus is in the planet, or is in the sign of Taurus, this can be uprooting things, getting out of our comfort zone and kind of liberating us from a foundation that is no longer stable. This is also about eradicating and changing what we see and use as valuable. So during June 30th, when Mercury conjoins the sun and sextiles Uranus, there is going to be this insight that's kind of liberating, that kind of goes, oh, I have an idea in my head. Oh, this is starting to make sense. Oh, this is all starting to get cleared up. And it's going to feel really exciting, and it's going to be kind of volatile. So while you might see it, you might understand it, there can be some extreme ups and downs with it. So be a little bit careful as we get into the end of June with this Mercury retrograde. And when you do realize something and you need to uproot something, or you really need to change something, this is going to be a really good time to do that, especially as we get into the month of July. Now, if you've been paying attention to astrology for a while, you know that July is going to be a really, really interesting and a really rough month. So why I bring this up is because this Mercury retrograde is really a time to go like, hey, what do I need? How can I kind of protect myself? How can I be a little bit more conservative and focus on me? And not in the selfish way of like me, but like this is more of a time to take care of yourself before you start taking care of other people. You can't invite people over for tea and not have a pot full of tea to pour them tea to. That's kind of confusing, but you get what I'm trying to say. And as we get into July, things get a little bit rough. And on July 8th, this is when Mercury, still retrograde, is going to be making a square to Mars, while Mars is in Aries. Mars is in its home sign in Aries, and Mars is going to eventually retrograde in Aries as well. And if you go outside in the summer, you're going to see the big red planet all at the top of the sky all night long. Now, Mars is the planet of separating, of cutting, of conflicts, of fights. And the square aspect is a sign of tension, a sign of conflict. So as this Mercury retrograde progresses and makes this square to Mars, there's going to be this agitation and this frustration. And like I said earlier, where this Mercury retrograde is more about rethinking, reviewing, planning about what we need, what is of necessity, how do we take care of ourselves a little bit more, that square to Mars might bring in some conflicts. Not everyone wants you to take care of yourself a little bit more. And you know, when you start doing the things you need to do, it might make some more people upset. So expect to kind of, you know, have some conflicts with this. And the best part about this is not necessarily, you know, well, I don't want to say the best part about this. The thing to realize about this is that, hey, what do I need and how can I address my needs in a softer tone, in a more empathizing tone? The sign of Cancer is about relating. It is about bringing things in. It is about connecting, not necessarily connecting, but kind of like blending things together. So with Mercury in Cancer, be a little bit more soft-spoken. Speak a little bit more with empathy and sympathy. And I think that's going to come really important with the Mercury-Mars square, because when Mercury does square Mars, it's going to be easy to kind of, you know, spit off the tongue and be a little bit more agitated and kind of, you know, vent those frustrations a little bit more. But what's more important is with Mercury squaring Mars, this is going to be a good time to separate or cut out the stuff that isn't needed in your life anymore. Mars is like a knife, and if you don't want something that's hanging around too much longer and it's kind of weighing you down, don't be afraid to pull out that knife and cut it off. this Mercury-Mars square during this Mercury retrograde phase is going to be a really critical time to look at what needs to be separated because it needs to be separated. Now, the beginning of this Mercury retrograde is a little bit lighter. It is a little bit more of a time to rethink and revalue. However, as we get towards the end, things get a little bit serious. And then once we have that Mercury and Mars square, a few days later on July 12th is when Mercury is going to finally station direct. And what this means basically is after we've reflected, we've reviewed, and all of the things that Mercury has changed, now we get to go over all of that again. Mercury originally went through this part of the sky earlier in May and in June. And while we were building up things during then, this Mercury retrograde kind of made us have to go over it again. Maybe something wasn't right. Maybe we didn't do things the exact right way. However, as Mercury stations direct and begins to move forward, now with the experience that we've had, we get to move forward with a clearer mindset of what is needed, or being able to say things a little bit more empathetically, with more sympathy. This is going to be a time of focusing on who to trust and who to trust with what you say and with what you think or with what you project out there. So let's start talking about the thing that you all want to know. What does this mean for your sign? Aries, this is going to be rethinking and reviewing what's going on in the home life, with your family, with your parents. This might be a miscommunication with your family or with your parents, or if you're moving somewhere, you might have a problem with your lease, or you might have a problem going on in the home and the living situation, maybe even with roommates. So make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's with whatever needs to be taken care of in the home and the family life. Taurus, this is going to be about your communication, your ideas, and also how you do things. How do you take care of yourself? How do you put things into your system? How do you utilize yourself and what you have and what you know to your best abilities? And this might be more about focusing on the best way to really do things that are more geared towards your needs and what actually needs to be taken care of, or what needs to be said and addressed. Gemini, this is going to be about your money. What are you spending your money on? Why are you spending your money on that? What needs to be assessed with your finances and your possessions? And this is going to be a time where you might have some problems with your money. You might be spending a little bit more. So this is going to be a little bit more important to really calculate all of your finances so things kind of don't get missing. Cancer, this is going to be about you. This is literally going to be about you. What are you saying? What do you need? What are you trying to get across to other people, and who do you need to trust with that? During this Mercury retrograde, I think this is going to be a really big time to really reflect and review who you are and how you put that part of yourself out there. Leo, like I said earlier, this is going to be a time of things kind of coming out of the woodworks, out of your subconscious that you may not have realized or that you might have seen before that you need to take care of, or things that you didn't know that you need kind of start to come out, and you start to actually take care of those needs that you didn't even know that you had. Virgos, you guys are going to be experiencing some miscommunications with friendships, so it's going to be important to only say what needs to be said with your friends. And this also may not be you. This might be your friends say something a little bit more, off-putting to you. So give your friends some room, be a little bit more empathizing and sympathizing, and don't be afraid to forgive. Libra risings, this is going to be about your career and your work. This doesn't mean you're going to lose your job or you're going to change everything, but this may be a miscommunication or some errors kind of going on in your work that might be kind of annoying to get through. However, like I said earlier, focus on what needs to be done, focus on what needs to be taken care of. Don't go too out of your way, and everything's going to be just fine. Scorpios, this is going to be about your beliefs. I would say far distance travel, but with COVID, you're probably not going anywhere. This Mercury retrograde is going to be about your belief system, religion, or if you're in school, your higher education, you might have miscommunications or different thoughts and ideas regarding your belief system, your spirituality, or your higher education, what you're really pursuing. Sagittarius, this has to deal with your money and other people's money. If you are in any type of debt, or if you owe any money, this is going to be a really good time to try to get that taken care of, because there might be some miscommunications or some mishaps. So I would also suggest don't take a loan out during this time. Try not to borrow too much money because it might give you a problem. And if you do borrow money, just make sure you cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure things get taken care of and that there's no miscommunications there. Capricorn, this is going to deal with relationships. And this might be a time where there's a big miscommunication between you and a partner, or you and a specific individual in your life. So make sure that you're bruteness isn't too, cold, and that you can actually relate a little bit more and be a little bit more sympathetic with other people. However, this doesn't always revolve around you. This Mercury retrograde might be someone else saying something wrong to you, and you might be a little bit offended. So be sure to take care of yourself. Be sure to be, again, empathizing and sympathizing with you, and make sure to take care of what needs to get taken care of. Aquarius, this has to deal with your health and your habits, your day-to-day routine, and even your work. There might be a miscommunication with your fellow employees or coworkers. And as Mercury retrogrades in Cancer, this might bring up what needs to get taken care of with your health, or what habits do you have or routines do you have that you can kind of get cut out of your life that aren't really necessarily needed. And this is going to be more of a time to kind of focus on your habits, on your health, and say, what do I need to take care of? And finally, Pisces. This has to deal with love and romance and honestly what you want. This is going to be a big shift in how you feel about certain situations, how you feel about what it is that you want. And this can be about rethinking and reevaluating what it is that you want, both in a creative sense, but both in a romantic and a sex sense. So this is going to be kind of a fun thing for you, in my opinion, compared to all the other signs. So Jerry's final thoughts on this Mercury retrograde, it's about taking care of what needs to get taken care of, what needs to be said, what needs to be addressed, and how can we do that in a sympathizing, in a very relatable way. Don't be afraid to say what needs to be said to other people. Don't be afraid to take care of yourself and put yourself first, because here's the cold truth. We are going through a lot right now. We're going through some of the craziest shit we have ever seen in our humanity. And during this time, it's important to take care of ourselves. Especially if you are online. Mercury is about communication, and this is going to deal with our online social interactions. So don't be afraid to take some time away from yourself to get away from all of that. Don't be afraid to take time for yourself to mentally clean and drain what's kind of going on up here, so you can go back out in the world with a healthier mindset about situations. There is a lot going on in the world, and with social media and how much we're all communicating and how things are just divided right now, just don't be afraid to take care of yourself, and also don't be afraid to show everyone that you're around more sympathy, and don't be afraid to be more empathizing, and don't be afraid to trust more people, because it's up to us to trust those people, to create that connection that is so needed right now. And especially after being in quarantine for months, we need these connections. We cannot go that much longer with just all of this division and all of this cutting. Make those connections. But most importantly, like I said, the Mercury retrograde in the beginning is a little bit softer. Once we get towards the end, when you start putting yourself first and you start making these adjustments of what needs to be done, you're gonna run into some conflicts. A good analogy is when you're in AA and you have to actually own up to being sober, there's a lot of rough things that you have to confront, but it's what's needed. So during this time, during the end of this Mercury retrograde, and as we move forward in July, you kind of have to, you can take care of yourself, and, you can take a bath and you can give yourself a massage, but if there's someone that is in your life that, is saying a bunch of stuff to you that you don't want to be said, you kind of have to address that, and you can't just be putting it off. What I'm trying to say is, with this Mercury retrograde, while it is about taking care of ourselves and nurturing ourselves, there's some dirty work that's going to be involved with that. And that's a little bit rough and difficult, but if you really take the time out of your day to really focus on what you need and what's best for you, it won't be as hard as you think it will be. If you are wanting to know how this Mercury retrograde is specifically going to be affecting you, please make sure to check out my website and book a reading with me. I absolutely love helping people out during this Mercury retrograde time, since it's a great time to rethink and review things. I'd love to give you a different perspective on what's going on with your situation and give you some more insight and clarity. So feel free to reach out to me and book a reading. I'd love to help you guys out. And if you haven't heard of me before, this is my YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe if you guys like this video. I do these Mercury retrograde videos all the time, as well as monthly and weekly horoscopes. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope this Mercury retrograde goes well for you, and I'll be seeing you next time.